Article 13 and the directive on copyrights seems to have everybody super scared. I thought I'd jump in here and give a creator's perspective from someone who's been doing this for about 30 plus years and see if we could separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to whether or not Article 13 is in fact evil. I, like a lot of other creators here on the YouTube space, have been following the developments of Article 13, which is part of the directive on copyright put forward by the European Union. Now, there's a lot of nuance to this, and I thought my 30 years experience as a creator, specifically how my career as a musician was impacted by copyright law and infringement, might offer a little bit more context to this discussion. First off, let's clear it up. What is Article 13? Simply put, the directive on copyright, of which Article 13 is one part, places more responsibilities on websites like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter to make sure that copyrighted material isn't being illegally shared on their platforms. The directive on copyright would make online platforms liable for copyright infringement and supposedly direct more revenue from tech giants toward artists and journalists. I think maybe it's going to not do anything for artists and journalists, but maybe for other corporations that aren't tech giants. Under current legislation, platforms such as YouTube aren't responsible for copyright violations, although they must remove that content when directed to do so by the rights holders. The problem isn't a new one. Creators aren't getting proper recognition and remuneration for their intellectual property. The directive on copyright seeks to make that more possible, but is it doing the job? In doing so, the EU has created a legislation that will impact other creators and their host entities to a point where creating their content will likely be made impossible, or will change the landscape of creating content quite significantly for smaller creators in general. The internet is all about sharing. Sharing is not a bad thing. But at the same time, sharing without proper credit or remuneration for intellectual property used in those creations creates a system where, if abused, other creators suffer. Is Article 13 the solution? No, I'm more of a proponent of the fair use laws that already exist in the US. Put simply, fair use means copyrighted material is used in a transformative manner, something like a commentary about a film or a book, a review, something like that. A piece of music where the copyrighted material is used to support a thesis derived by the creator of that content. Fair use gives credit to the copyright owner and doesn't present the work for the sake of presenting it. So, okay, that's not copyright infringement. Fair use. But under the Directive on Copyright, Article 13, the host entity, like YouTube or others, will be made to determine if a piece of copywritten material is being used correctly. And I don't believe it's possible for YouTube or any other entity to do that effectively. I've been a casualty of copyright infringement myself, not directly, but as a musician working hard back in the mid-90s and early 2000s to make a living with my music. I was a songwriter and a performer. I still am a songwriter and performer, but I was dependent on the label system that was in place at the time to advance. In the early 90s, the music industry was flush from the success of the grunge movement, and they were actively looking for new bands and artists that could be the vanguard of the next big thing. There was money to be spent, and labels were more likely to take chances on artists who were not sure things. But with the advent of Napster and the free and illegal sharing of music outside of the structure of these existing channels, taking away from the income that more successful musicians and their labels, the label system contracted and became the music industry we see today, which is comprised really only of a much more bland, less adventurous, and interesting musical landscape. Nothing against the music of today, but it is not of the people, by the people, for the people. I point this out only to make clear that there are victims of copyright infringement that might not be immediately apparent. But does that mean Article 13 will solve the problem? No. The industries affected by copyright infringement have adjusted, and now outlets like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and others have become a part of the way that business is done. not an impediment. There are people who abuse the system, who break the laws, but then they are punished. The system as it exists, where copyright owners are responsible for policing their own intellectual property or hiring agents who make that their business, is enough. It's not perfect, but it's enough. The onus should fall on the copyright owners and the creators using that material to ensure that the work is being shared responsibly. Creators, you and me, need to educate ourselves on how to responsibly, correctly use copyrighted material. As it's currently written, Article 13 is akin to using a shotgun to hunt mice. The scope is too broad, and the onus for who is responsible for policing the use of copyrighted materials should not be put on the distributors of the content. That will result in the destruction of those entities and the loss of an outlet yet again for hundreds of thousands of creators. There is 72 years worth of content uploaded to YouTube daily. If YouTube is responsible for vetting all of that content under Article 13, YouTube as it exists will cease to be. Only creators who have the support of larger industry entities will have the resources to protect themselves, and the individual creators who are trying to come up from the bottom will be silenced. That's not the intent of Article 13, but it will be the end result. YouTube and other outlets will become corporate-controlled shells of their former selves, if they're not already, just like the music and publishing industries before them. It's not wrong to protect people's intellectual property, but it is wrong to create blanket legislation that can't interpret the nuance of the situation. Article 13 may be well-intended, but it is definitely wrong-headed. It's imperative that everyone educate themselves about this legislation, and I, for one, don't want to watch another creative outlet that I'm using to die. Educate yourself. Use your voice in tandem with others to advocate for yourself. If you don't, you'll have no one to blame but yourself when they take away your voice. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen. I really do appreciate it. My name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts. Until the next time, I'm out.